It is time for On the Way, our weekly segment on all things considered, breaking down the week's transit news. Joining us is WNYC's transportation reporter Stephen Nesson and editor Clayton Guza. All right, this week you reported on the first major study that's looked at the impact of congestion pricing on air quality. It seems pretty promising, right, Stephen? We know the tolls have helped reduce gridlock. Have they had a similar effect on air pollution?
Well, let me set this up first, Sean.
Okay.
This came from a team of researchers at Cornell University. It was published in a branch of the journal Nature. It was peer-reviewed, so it seems pretty solid. Mm-hmm. Here's what they found.
Okay.
You know the fine particle pollution? It's called PM2s. When we talk about bad air quality, we talk about those levels. Mm-hmm. It's the stuff that impacts children and older people, those with underlying health conditions. It's the stuff that can get deep in your lungs and cause asthma. That level dropped by 22% in Manhattan. Here's one of the co-authors of the study, Tim Frazier.
What excites me about that is that it means that the congestion pricing didn't just cause traffic to relocate, right? It didn't just shift air pollution over down to New Jersey or something like that. Instead, it caused a system-wide change in how people are commuting.
So, right, that's the other thing. It didn't just send traffic to Jersey or the Bronx. Mm-hmm. The whole region has seen an impact from this. Outside of the toll zone, the particle pollution dropped by 0.7%, which doesn't sound huge, but Frazier says it's pretty remarkable. And one of the biggest reasons for this major drop across the region, especially in Manhattan, is heavy trucks stopped coming into the city by about 18%. 18% fewer of them entering the city, and those are the ones that spew the most pollutants.
Yeah, and it's hard to, you really have to underscore how much big trucks contribute to air pollution in the city. These large trucks, I mean, they're diesel burning. When they're stuck in traffic, they're idling. The city's done big crackdowns on idling trucks. These refrigerated trucks use up so much fuel. So when you have inefficient streets, you're leading to more air pollution. And there's a reason why the MTA structured its tolls the way they did. Cars pay $9 during the daytime. Large trucks pay $21.60. So they pay disproportionately more. And the study indicates they're not only moving faster and more efficiently through Manhattan, but that a lot of them are circumventing the toll zone altogether, that logistics companies are looking to different methods to make deliveries in Manhattan. We've seen the city start to ramp up maritime freight delivery. We've seen companies like Amazon roll out these smaller kind of electric e-bike, little delivery bike, cargo bikes that you've seen around town. And what the study also shows, at least so far, is that we're not seeing a jump in pollution in the Bronx. And that was a big worry for a lot of local leaders there. Environmental analysis released by the MTA before the tolls went into effect predicted that there could be a slight increase of traffic after congestion pricing launched on the Cross Bronx Expressway. I mean, that area around the Cross Bronx has some of the highest rates of asthma in the country. Yeah. But we're not necessarily seeing that so far. So it's really, this study is really remarkably good news.
So we've talked a lot about the numbers in this study, right? But what about the actual effect on the public? Is this something we can actually feel?
It kind of depends. I mean, I went out to talk to folks in Midtown to see if they've noticed a difference. Mm-hmm. I ran into 31-year-old Catherine Bucci. She said she's noticed fewer vehicles in the city, which has been good for one thing.
I've noticed I could jaywalk more, but when it comes to pollution, I don't think I noticed too much of a difference. I think I'd notice it more maybe if we had less buses or larger vehicles.
One funny thing about that is the MTA is using money from congestion pricing to buy electric buses. Okay. But right, like she said, she might not notice it because it impacts, like we said, sensitive groups, folks that exercise outside. You always say, Sean, on bad air quality days, avoid strenuous activity outdoors. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I ran into someone who does a lot of exercise outdoors, 37-year-old runner Ryan Wilson.
I pay attention very much to the air and how clean it is for me. And if it's not, sometimes I have a jogger with a mask. I'm thinking I definitely have seen a lot of changes out here. As somebody who benefits from the environment a lot by using it, I definitely can say I see that.
Okay.
One thing that this study doesn't account for is that I quit smoking over the last year.
Yeah.
So, I'm smoking you smoke like a chimney.
Right.
No longer using SOA as an ashtray. Yeah. I don't know if they factored that in. Uh-huh. Another thing worth noting is that, the air quality is still not at what the EPA considers healthy levels, but it's getting close. And remember, if Hochul, it might have reached those healthy levels if Hochul hadn't played politics with the toll.
Right.
You'll remember that last year she delayed the launch of it till after the election. It was originally supposed to go in at $15 as a base daytime toll for drivers. Now it's $9. Imagine how much more reduction in traffic, how much more of a reduction in air pollution we might see if it were at that $15 level.
Yeah.
And just a reminder, it will be up to $12 in 2028, $15 in 2031.
All right, this week, once again, Stephen, your favorite thing. You donned a hard hat and a vest. You went deep below the streets to report on a major infrastructure project. This week was a 6-month check-in on Amtrak's East River tunnel work. Remind us what they're doing there and how it's going.
So this is a project to fix 2 of the 4 tunnels Amtrak owns that run under the East River. They were damaged in Hurricane Sandy. They're used by the Long Island Railroad, Amtrak, and NJ Transit, but mostly just to get the trains to a yard in Queens where they're stored during the day before heading back to Penn Station. Amtrak's fixing 1 tunnel at a time, just 2 of them, though. You might remember I went down before the work began last spring.
Right.
I saw walls that literally crumbled when you touch them. We learned there's regular electrical explosions in the concrete wall from the old cables. There's water leaks that flood the tracks even on good days. So 6 months later, the demolition work is all done. We went down there and I saw, looks like a new concrete tube in there. It's bright and dry. And they say by next July, this tunnel should be completely done, marking 13 months on time. One curious thing, though, about this particular tour I went on, it was led by Amtrak, but the head of the Long Island Railroad, Rob Free, tagged along. And he's someone who was pretty critical of Amtrak and at the last minute was urging them to not do this work. Don't do the full shutdown, only do nights and weekends. But Laura Mason, who's Amtrak's executive vice president of capital delivery, was there, and she explained why that approach just isn't feasible here.
All that concrete demolition, tearing out the bench walls, replacing those high voltage cables, that cannot be done on nights and weekends, because what that means is that every Monday you're running service, you're having to put a bunch of temporary work back together, stringing temporary cables along the walls, trying to keep the trains moving. And then Friday night you would spend most of that day, if not Saturday as well, tearing out those temporary works to get maybe a few hours worth of work done. So it's really not possible to do the full scope of this rehabilitation on nights and weekends.
Yeah, and Rob Free from the Long Island Railroad told reporters afterward, I think Amtrak's doing a pretty good job, but he also credited himself for holding their feet to the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the MTA and Amtrak mix like oil and vinegar.
Yeah, right.
They really don't get along, but the MTA was really worried because the Long Island Railroad relies on these tunnels so much that it would, one incident in one of the tunnels would gum things up in and out of Penn Station. We saw that once or twice in a significant way, but really not in a way that the MTA had feared. And just like some background, MTA Chair Jano Lieber has a completely different philosophy for fixing these sandy-damaged East River tunnels. You remember the L train 7 years ago? God, we're getting old. But like when they were going to shut it down for more than a year to do similar repairs that they're doing on the Amtrak tunnels, then Cuomo comes in last minute and says, we're going to do smaller kind of patchwork. There was some criticism as if whether or not that would hold up in the long run.
They wouldn't call it patchwork.
Right. And Jano Lieber really executed that. It saved riders a headache, but at the same time, it wasn't this full-scale repair that Amtrak's doing right now on their East River tunnels.
Yeah, well, we'll have to leave it there for today. That's WNYC Stephen Nesson and Clayton Guza. You can stay in the know on all things transit or ask a question of your own by signing up for our weekly newsletter at gothamist.com/ontheway. My friends, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.